I don't know, with your permission, if I can take off.
Yes, please do. When you speak, you're entitled to take it off.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So
Yes.
I have to keep that in mind.
No real war. You can share the Tamando Wonaganali, the Secretary General, the other Marshal Darling, the Deputy President, very nice, the Clemo, we are here to make a submission as requested by this important inquiry. We want to take this opportunity to also thank you for availing yourself to come and lead this complicated process. We know that you are a man of integrity and that your wisdom will help us navigate this matter. Former Deputy Chief Justice, Section 19 of the Constitution says every citizen is free to make political choices, which includes the right to form a political party, to participate in activities of or recruit members for or a political party, to campaign for a political party or cause. To enable this important constitutional clause, Section 190, subsection 1 of the Constitution obliges the Independent Electoral Commission as an institution designated to strengthen constitutional democracy to do the following: manage election of national, provincial, and municipal legislative bodies in accordance with national legislation. Ensure that those elections are free and fair. We must emphasize that. Ensure that those elections are free and fair. We are here to make a submission that if the local government election scheduled for the 27th of October 2021 proceed under the current conditions, they will not be fair, will not be free, and will not be held. We should also note, former Deputy Chief Justice, that this date of the 27th of October was announced by the President in a political party rally. It was not announced in a neutral venue where it is actually expected that a president of a country will make such a pronouncement. It was in a rally in KwaZulu-Natal of a political party where this announcement was made. Proceeding with elections in October 2021 will violate Section 1980, subsection 1 of the Constitution, which stipulates that the Independent Electoral Commission must ensure that those elections are free and fair. We as leaders of political parties, our members and branches always live under the threat of being arrested for violating Disaster Management Act. If the SAPS proceed with arresting EFF leaders for violating the Disaster Management Act, it means the entire leadership and membership of the EFF will be arrested, because if election proceed, we will have no choice but to call political gatherings. Our submission deals with the following: election in 2021 will not be free and fair. Election in 2021 will not protect the lives of our people. Postponement of elections. We make this submission because we know that elections are not just what happens on voting day, but involves many physical activities and preparations which begin more than 12 months before the actual voting. Again, to note the former Deputy Chief Justice is that by the time you give your report, you will be left with 3 months, because since the breakout of this pandemic, political activity has not been free in the country because of lockdown activities. So the only time we're going to have the real time is when you come out of this and say, guys, there's nothing I can do, you have to go to elections. So we'll be left with almost 3 months to choose candidates and to do all manner of things that needs to be done before the elections. Because the emphasis is that elections is not what happens on the election day, it's what happens prior to the election day. Because many people think that elections is what happens on the 27th of October. South Africa has a voting population of 29 million people above the age of 18, and only 25 million are on the voters' roll. In the 2019 general elections, about 80 million people turned out to vote, making this to be 45% population and 65.9% of those registered to vote. In the 2016 local government election, 14th of July 2021. So if he uplifts this on the 14th, then it means we'll be left with almost 3 to 4 days to encourage people to register. So the registration is the same as the voters' voting day. you must mobilize people to go and register. It's very important that they register, because without them registering, then there's no need to have elections, because people can only vote if they are registered. Not only that, this day of registration is also used to verify whether you are appearing in the correct voters roll. So you can't say I'm registered, therefore there's so many million people registered, even if others don't register, we don't care. Those who are registered must still go to verify if they are appearing in the voters roll, but also if they've relocated, they must now go to register in the new voting district. So it doesn't only affect the registered people, it also affects those who are registered, who must verify, or those who seek to change their voting district. Political parties are constrained from running mass campaigns and mobilization in all areas to encourage so many people, particularly the youth, to go and register to vote, and with so many people excluded from voting, elections will not be free and fair. For effective election purposes, the EFF established election 11. I think that the former Deputy Justice can go through what we do internally as the EFF in voting, because it's when there is lockdown that have declared places, no-go areas. The political territory has been declared as a no-go area. And therefore, with the no-go area, you are guaranteed that there will not be a free and fair elections. Some people came here to argue that ICASA gives us an opportunity to advertise, they give us free slots and all of that. One, the ICASA slots are dominated by dominating political parties. They are given prime spots because of the numbers they have. In 2019, the EFF slots which were given by ICASA, if I'm not wrong, Deputy President, they were running around 11, 12, some of them 2 in the morning. When everybody is sleeping, the EFF is advertising. So what is the point? I mean, it's like we're advertising to ghosts, and ghosts are not allowed to vote. So that's what happened. So ICASA, those who say no, ICASA gives you a plate, you can advertise, people will see you, and then on the day of elections, they will go and vote. They are dominated by dominating political parties. They're small parties, which I've seen on your list here. Majority of them not even in parliament, because slots are also allocated to those who are in parliament. They will not have an opportunity to advertise on TV and on radio. So we are aware that there is ICASA slots, but they are not sufficient, and they are given to political parties that are dominating.
Very brief interruption,
Yes.
I'm seeing the head of ICASA this afternoon.
Yes.
We haven't followed that principle of proportionality. It may well be that it's something that we ought to debate afresh, isn't it?
Yes.
I haven't followed proportionality.
Absolutely.
I've listened to everybody,
Yes.
whatever they're standing, if there is time and slot. So we're seeing ICASA this afternoon to try and debate that issue. It's just a short interruption. I think you should go
Thank you.
ahead.
No problem.
Are there a few questions that I'll ask at the end?
No problem. The other issue which we want to deal with is the need to protect life. South Africa has seen close to 2 million infections and 59,000 deaths due to COVID-19, and government response has been less than satisfactory. More lives will be lost, and this is how South Africa is currently in the 3rd wave of the pandemic, which the President of the Republic said is highly infectious. Less than 5 million people have been vaccinated, and this means that the necessary herd immunity will not be achieved anytime soon. There is already a prediction that the 4th wave will commence in October, the month of election. We know the limitation of government and its slow pace in vaccination, but we believe that if given until the end of 2021, there will be a sizable number of vaccinations and therefore space to open political gatherings and work. Just to deal briefly with the vaccination program today, Deputy Chief Justice, we had a march demanding that other vaccines from other countries must be allowed. The limitation in this country, Justice, is that we are subjected to certain vaccines. which have got problems in terms of mass supply. They've got their own health issues. That is but one thing. They are unable to give us more. As a result, we need other vaccines that are available in other countries to be provided in the country, so that if J&J has got limitation or Pfizer has got limitation, you can have Sputnik coming in, or Sinovac coming in, or the Cuban vaccine coming in, majority of which have been tested by peers and used. Russia and China, their vaccines have been used in more than 67 countries. The Chinese one, the World Health Organization has approved it. But alone, in China alone, it has vaccinated more than 1 billion people, which shows that there is no serious problem. So we think that there is something more than just vaccines not meeting what is required. Because if our people are vaccinated, we can have elections at any time, because that is the most practical thing that needs to happen, in particular with regard to what is facing us now. But Section 11 of the Constitution, former Deputy Chief Justice, you will know it better than me. It says everyone has the right to life. In a state versus Makwanyane death penalty case, Chief Justice Chakalson said, the most important of all human rights and value that informs the interpretation of many, possibly all other rights, is all rights in the Constitution are subject to the right to life. So to say to people must go and vote under such conditions, we're going to subject our people to what they've been subjected to in India. They are going, and here we're faced with the same crisis the Indians were facing. So we cannot, considering the right to life, think that the right to vote supersedes the right to life. What comes first at all times when we want to make a necessary determination should be the right to life. Is there a threat to life? We're in a situation here, former Deputy Chief Justice, that if we're in a war situation and the 5 years has collapsed, the people who come to you and say, no, let them go out and vote. Even when guns, people are shooting their bombs outside, we must say, no, the Constitution says 5 years, there's nothing we can do. 5 years, even during the war, go and vote. We are in a war now. We are in this situation we find ourselves. And the reason why they are invoking this Disaster Management Act and all of that is because we are in a difficult situation now. And the same logic that would have applied during the war is the same logic that applies now. The Commander-in-Chief of the Republic of South Africa, when he unleashed soldiers during the first lockdown, it was clear that we are in a war situation which requires the military to intervene. Why would you go and call soldiers to come and distribute roses? Soldiers are not for distribution of roses. They were called because we are in a situation of war. And therefore we can't say when the lives of our people are under threat, because we're in a situation of war, say no, 5 years is here, it doesn't matter what happens, we must still comply even when the right to life it is threatened. So we are asking that these elections must be postponed. We know for a fact that the IEC has actually postponed elections before. You will know, former Deputy Chief Justice, and I think they would have shared this with you if they were honest with you, that there were by-elections that were postponed. And those by-elections were postponed beyond 90 days. What we're asking them to do, we're not asking them to do something they've not done. They've done it before. They've postponed last year elections for more than 90 days. And the EFF is just making a simple request. Let's postpone until April next year. I wanted to deal with the actual dates they postponed to. Is there a DP in the submission? I just want the relevant paragraph where the IEC postponed. 47. Postponed the postponement was approximately 244 days long, a number beyond the prescribed 90 days. So if the EFF says we must postpone to April next year, we must then calculate how many days are those, and if whether you are asking the IEC something that they've not done. They've done it, and it was last year. It's not something that was done during President Mandela's term. It was done last year, and now when we ask them to do the same thing that they've done, they say no, we can't do that. So we ask that the elections be postponed to April, because if by end of October there will be some sense of clarity in terms of vaccination, in terms of the behavioral patterns of the pandemic, and even then, if the situation is not what we envisaged, we can still postpone until we are all guaranteed that it is safe. This IEC must approach the Constitutional Court on the basis of rationality to illustrate that it will not be possible to hold free and fair elections under the current conditions. If needs be, the relevant legislation and constitutional amendment must be effected because it is practically impossible to hold free and fair elections in 2021 under lockdown and restrictions and threats of arresting political party leaders and all of that. The reality is that former Chief Justice, if you say we are proceeding, we are not going to comply with the lockdown regulations, because we're not going to sit back and allow to be killed. We are going to have to go and fight for our survival, because political power is our life. We need to be in power to remain relevant, to serve our people. So anything that says proceed, you are now asking us to defy the lockdown, because we are going to have to choose between proceeding under certain conditions which will not be favorable, because the space must be open and be a level field, fair, free for everyone. Now, the last point I want to make, which disturbed all of us, was the IEC appointing you to investigate this and then still proceed to launch an election. And when we challenge them, they say, no, we want to show that we are technically ready. It has got nothing to do with technically being ready. It's a party. They were enjoying. They were going to have lunch at the expense of the resource that we do not have, former Deputy Chief Justice. When you are technically ready, you are technically ready. Whether Chief Justice says in July you are ready, proceed or not, you are ready. You don't need a festivity to prove that you are ready, if you are indeed ready. So we take an exception about that, because they want to project you as engaging in the most useless exercise that is a foregone conclusion. I know they came here and said, no, our launching didn't mean any other thing, but to us, it should have waited for this. We can even launch a day after you have announced. We are all here. We don't have to take any plane from Mauritius to come here. So we take serious exception to that, because this creates an impression that this is just a futile exercise. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you for observing the time limits. We much appreciate it. I have a few questions that we have the debate. I've heard the last point, and I've seen the exchange. I'm not going to go into it. You've made the point, and IEC felt important for them to respond to that. But you know that I wouldn't be a trifle. I would agree anybody to make me a trifle.
I know.
Period. I'm here for country to evaluate as genuinely as possible how do we protect lives and limb on the one side without collapsing our democratic project. There is a tension, and there's a tension I'd like to do. I'll produce a report which you all will see, and some will like, some will not like, but you can be assured that I'm doing it at the height of my sincerity and not serving any particular. People have come here and submitted. Lockdown arrangements are a political ploy. In other words, they are an attempt to precipitate a postponement. Now you can comment on that as there's a first question. Now there's a conspiracy theory that has been thrown out there that We are where we are because of that. But more practically, at level 4 and 5, can we, in your view, ever hold free and fair elections? I think you've answered that already. Some parties have been struggling with that, whether if we're at, and then what about level 1 and 2? Can we hold elections at level 1 and 2? And the reason, the importance of this CIC is this, is that the pandemic is going nowhere. 3, that brings me to the next question, why March? Did you say March or April?
April.
April. Why April? So, I mean, that requires some justification. Some people have come through to me. You've said it in part, but I'd like to share it much more clearly. Why April next year? 4, much of the submissions before me have also been about councillor accountability, about governance, about probity, about the infestation of corruption. And why should we, they argue, keep in place councillors who have plainly failed the people? So what are you extending? And what about the new flow of funds and new terms? Should we allow those who have been there still to be, those the ones who will be handling sort of new funds in a new municipality in a new term? And if we postpone, aren't we frustrating that particular concern, which is an accountability concern? The last issue is about political messaging. That's my 4th question. This is new normal, and you've heard people argue there must be a new response. Political messaging must adapt to the new world that's imposed on us. We never again will be able to hold rallies the same way that we held them in the past. As you realize, I'm repeating submissions which have been made by others, and I want to give you an opportunity to meet them before your time runs out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Justice. Lockdown is used for political reasons, not for elections, to run away from accountability. I agree with that argument. But it's not used to postpone the elections. It's used to run away from accountability. You have a situation where the president doesn't account to parliament that sits physically. Because when it meets virtually, it makes it impossible for him to be held accountable. And then go to England to go and meet his counterparts without a mask and meet physically. They don't meet virtually. But here at home, he doesn't want to meet his counterparts and his colleagues physically. So it is used to curtail accountability, but also to deal with political dissent and stifle political engagement and mobilization in the country, purely for political purposes, not for elections. I think that behind the brain of the lockdown is not because the elections must be postponed. It must be that you enjoy power for the next 5 years without being held accountable. And even if you want to do so through picket lines, through protests and gatherings, it is practically impossible. If you do that through parliament, engaging robustly, and they don't like your view, they just press a button, boom, you are out. That's how they suppress accountability with a button on Zoom. Wow, you are finished. You finish an accountability in a democracy through a button. We cannot have a democracy that functions like that. It's not about money for my Deputy Chief Justice. You know, I wish we had more time. You know that Telecom said to this government, we have money, we want to vaccinate all our workers, plus there are 5 family members. Can you tell us where to buy these vaccines so that we don't contravene what you represent? They said to Telecom, no, bring the money here, we'll buy for you. Because it's about who's going to control the pest. So the money is there. People can be vaccinated and we can open the country. So they don't want to open the country because it helps them. Under any level, former Deputy Chief Justice, elections will not be free and fair because you cannot curtail the movements of politicians. Under lockdown, under level 1, there are still conditions. So Yes, the pandemic is not going anywhere. But if we vaccinate, majority of our people will be able to open the country and will live with this epidemics. The same way we're living with flu. We can't close the country because there is flu. We have learned to live with it. We know what type of precautionary measures we must take to avoid it. So even this pandemic, we're going to learn to live with it, but make the solution available, which is vaccination. So we agree with that. April, because we must give ourselves sufficient time between your report and the next elections to check if the behavior of the pandemic is being put under control, but also to allow some sufficient space in between for politicians to launch their manifestos and all of that. So that's where we come from. Accountability happens now. Even if we extend the laws of how we hold people accountable, they are not suspended. Any municipality that collapses and is not being accountable, it can be dissolved under laws and then a new administration appointed to run that particular municipality. I forgot to mention this point earlier. People keep on saying, if you stretch beyond 5 years, you will be undermining the democratic mandate of those people. What about when we cut their term of office? Because there's power to cut their term of office. If a municipality is not performing, we can cut their term and dissolve that municipality even before 5 years. So if we can cut it, it means we can extend it. It's only democratic when certain condition dictates that we cut, we reduce it and appoint administration and call a rerun of election in that particular municipality. It is democratic, we accept that too. Because if democracy means only 5 years, then it means reducing it through interventions and calling for rerun is also undemocratic. If we agree it is a democratic practice that it can be shortened for particular reasons, it equally applies that it can be extended for particular reasons. Political messaging, new normal, it will never happen with us, former Deputy Chief Justice. We are a country that is not developed. The new normal requires a lot of sophistication. It requires gadgets, it requires data, it requires all manner of ICT infrastructure, which we do not have. So a new normal will be for the suburbs, will be for those who have access. You know, we are a poverty-stricken country. As we speak today, the poverty levels have increased. You have a choice now to buy a data or to buy a bread. Our people will always buy bread. And this new normal is going to exclude majority of our people, including the township, by the way. Because every time we speak about rural, it's as if the township is more developed and has got resources. They are the most suffering people because they've got all manner of bills that they have to meet. So we wish the new normal. We want an advanced stage. We want to do all of these things. It will take us another 5, if not more than that, decades to get our country to comply with the new normal. So the new normal that says we can't call a rally, then it's undemocratic new normal, which we can't comply with. Because the only effective method to communicate with our people is face to face.
Well, CIC, thank you ever so much. I'm hardly point that if my report says to go to elections, then you're going to go out in the streets and campaign.
Yes.
So I have no comment on that. I've heard it. And the cameras saw you, I'm sure they heard it. But thank you for coming out. The complexity of the matter is an obvious one. We have to find a very careful, at least it is my function, is to calibrate these tensions that sit in this arrangement. You would have known that life matters to me. Life of our people matters deeply to me. But at the same time, we have to remain democratic. So it's going to be a very fine line. Let's see where it takes us to. But once more, you and the Deputy President and other leaders, thanks for coming out. I'm going to have to listen to a good few of your colleagues, and I'll listen to ICASA later today. And of course to the COVID COVID advisory committee, coordinating council,
Yes.
who will have the final word later today to tell us what is the scenario going forward.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And you must never think that for a second you are independent. We know you. You are the type that even when you disagree with us, we accept that with smile, because it will be justifiable. It will speak to the realities of our people. And when you got appointed here, it was the most exciting thing, because we knew that we'll get a hearing. You know, when Laube talk or no, team, that's what we accept. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Our next